welcome. This is another webinar here. Today's a big one. We're going to be talking about WIN-911 security. I see a lot of familiar faces out there in the attendees list, so probably worked with a lot of you. If you're new though, welcome. We're happy to have you. And Revis here with us. He's our product manager, as well as Cody Ben. He's the director of engineering. Started. Just a quick note about security before we get into the actual agenda and the prepared slides. You know, the fact of the matter is that if there's vulnerabilities, right, people are going to exploit them. We obviously have a lot of attention to detail in securing our product, but most of this can be, you know, created in an in-house environment for a safer experience for everybody, right? So teaching the people that you work with, you know, don't open don't open suspicious emails. That's probably going to get you before somebody tries to hack into your network. So, you know, malware attacks and ransomware attacks, those are usually user errors, right? Somebody clicked on something they shouldn't. So in-house training and keeping people informed on what they should and shouldn't be doing is definitely going to be a huge issue that you should teach people about. All right, so our agenda today, this is really going to be a lot about the built-in security that we have just by default in the product, and some of the optional things that you can do. Again, while I'm going through this, I'm going to be handing it off to Stephen Revis and Cody for certain topics, but if my audio or the screen sharing goes down or there's an issue, just throw that into the questions section. I'll try to keep that up and monitor it. So WIN-911 service account, we'll talk about why that's important. The intermodule communication, security. We'll go through distributed architecture, talk about the SCADA authentication, and then each of the notifiers, so voice, email, and then the mobile and security built into that. We'll also have some resources at the end. The webinar is on deck page for what's coming. And I really want this presentation to be is the Q&A session. So I'll just say that up front. We do have some good info for you. I think it's important that everybody sees it. But I really want the Q&A session to be the real meat behind this. So at the end of the slides, we'll go ahead and, you know, unmute everybody. And if you want to speak and talk to us and get your questions out, that's really what we're here for. There's going to be a lot of specifics, I'm sure, that aren't going to be covered by our slides. If you don't want to talk, but you want to drop it into the questions section and type it out, we'll try to answer those as well. So Revis, did you want to take over here?
Yeah, but can you skip one more slide ahead, please?
Sure.
To the intermodule one here. All right. Oh,
got it.
You can just go ahead and display it all.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Jeremiah. And we'll just go back to that slide when I'm done here.
Perfect.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Anytime throughout this presentation, if you have questions, please put them into the Q&A section of GoToMeeting. I'm sorry I didn't hear if you said that, Jeremiah. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows. If you have questions, type them into the Q&A section. If you can't find it, you can just type them in the chat section. Whatever you can do to get your questions out there so that we can answer them at the end. I wanted to start by talking about WIN-911 as a whole. If you're unfamiliar with WIN-911, it consists of several modules that work together in unison to make alarm notification possible. And because we have several modules, they need to have a way to communicate with each other. And we've decided that we're going to use HTTP endpoints, and I'll explain a little bit why on that on a slide in the future. But each one of our modules, because they're going to communicate over HTTP, need to host their own endpoints, and they need to consume the endpoints of our other modules. So, for example, if we have a data source module, it receives an alarm from something like FactoryTalk or InTouch. Once it gets that alarm from that SCADA system, it needs to send it to the rest of the WIN-911 system. So what it would likely do at that point is send it over to our dispatcher module, which is responsible for determining escalation and sending that alarm to the appropriate notifier. So the data source module would call the services, the web services on the data source module that are hosted as HTTP endpoints, and send it over. And this is done with SOAP messages, and XML data that's sent over to them. Then the data, once the dispatcher does its job, determines, hey, I need to send this to the SMS module, then it knows that I need to call these HTTP endpoints on the SMS module, and then it will do its job and send it out to the modem. And then this just goes on and on and on, and all the modules just continue working together again to make alarm notification possible, and everything else that the WIN-911 system does. Now, because we're hosting in these endpoints, they need to be protected somehow, and we're using Windows Authentication for that. It's a built-in feature of the WCF, Windows Communication Foundation framework that we're using. So Microsoft has gone ahead and made it really easy for us to implement this level of security. So what this means is that when anybody goes to call one of these endpoints, whether it's a process or somebody trying to manually do it, you need to be authenticated as either a local Windows user or a domain user if you're in a domain environment. So if you try to call one of these services and you cannot be authenticated, then you can't call that service. You can't interact with our system. You can't do anything. Once you are authenticated, you can once you are authenticated, all that traffic that travels between the different WIN-911 modules is using message security, so which is an end-to-end type of security, which basically means only the sender and receiver can read the contents of that message. There's a few parts of the message that are readable so that the message can get to where it needs to go. And this is different than something like point-to-point security, like transport security, like SSL. With SSL, the message is encrypted, but once it goes through an intermediary, that intermediary has to read it, then send it to the next place, and it has to re-encrypt it. And so there are places along the way where that message can be read. With message security, only the sender and only the receiver can read that message. Again, other than the certain parts that are exposed so that the message can get where it's going. That encryption algorithm that we're using is AES 256, so you don't have to worry. You don't have to use SSL certificates for any kind of encryption. It's just automatically built in, which is pretty nice. All this traffic that I'm talking about travels over just two TCP ports. For the bulk of the traffic, well, I mean, it's because it's evenly shared. We're using port 4020 and then port 80. And port 80 is primarily used by our application servers in IAS, and 4020 is used by our runtimes that run as Windows services. So I'll go to the next slide, or actually go back a slide, Jeremiah.
Yeah, you want to go backwards here.
Yeah. Sorry, the order got messed up, guys, so I apologize for that. So because we're using Windows Authentication, all of our processes need to be ran by a special account, and we call that a WIN-911 service account. When you install WIN-911, it needs to be a local administrator. It can still be a domain user, but just needs to be a member of the local admin group. And we do that for making deployments easier, making sure you can run services on the computer without running into issues. Over the years, we've learned every environment is different. What you think is going to work can be have a wrench thrown into it by whatever group policies are in place by that particular organization. So this is an account that's going to run these application pools, which these are app servers that run in IAS. So we use IAS to basically be the middleman between the database, which is an SQL, and the runtimes, which run as Windows services. All these app pools run as this special WIN-911 service account. You specify it during installation. All those Windows services run as the same account, and that's how they're able to authenticate with each other. If you're in a local, if you're in a work group, this can just be a local user. If you're in a domain, it can be a domain user or a local user. But if but you can't mix those up. If you're in a domain, and you're using a domain user for one thing, it needs to be domain user for everything. If you're using a local user, you have to use a local user for everything. They don't work intermixed very well at all. So keep that in mind. So if you're going to go domain, always use domain everything. If you're going to use a local user, always use a local user. So again, these service accounts are just used to run all the back-end services of WIN-911, and it keeps things real simple to keep things moving along. So we'll go next. Now we got to jump ahead 2 slides again. Sorry about the order. So I did mention that we are using SQL for our database. All of our modules store their information into SQL. It's a single instance with multiple databases. Each module has its own database. When you're installing Win911, that same Windows service account needs to be added as a sysadmin to that instance, so that it can, one, authenticate with the SQL Server and be able to do whatever is necessary to get Win911 set up when it's initially created. Now, when you're done installing Win911, if you're not comfortable with leaving that account as a sysadmin, then you could tighten the security down to just have read and write permissions of a database, because it doesn't need to make databases anymore. It just needs to be able to read and write from them. But if you were to run an upgrade, you would notice the upgrade would fail. So you would need to change that user permission back up to either sysadmin or really just a DB creator is all you would need to do at that point. When we store sensitive data like passwords into the databases, we don't store them in plain text. We encrypt them. So for example, if you're going to type in the password of your email server or your SCADA password for Factory Talk, we encrypt that data so that you cannot just go in there and just read it straight out of the database. And that's all I got to say about SQL. Again, if you guys have any questions, make sure you're entering them into the go to webinar Q&A section. So let's go to the next slide. As we go to the next slide, just one other thing. Those passwords that you also type in, we redact those from the logging. So if you ever go into Event Viewer and look at some of our logs, we do not post. We do not put the passwords in plain text there. Jeremiah, are you still there? I think we might have lost him.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Go to the next slide.
Okay, I did on my end. Is it not updating?
It's not updating for me. All right, so go to the next slide here. There we go. Distributed architecture. So one of the reasons that we decided that we're going to do HTTP for cross-module communication, so that we can have a distributed architecture very easily. So if you want to distribute the Win911 modules, for example, if you're using the Purdue model where you have multiple layers and you're trying to segment your network, you could have our data source module down on the level 2 or level 3 network collecting data from your SCADA system, while the rest of Win911 is running in your DMZ, or it could be running on your business network, or just another layer of your network. Basically, we're allowing you to separate all of these different modules as you need for your particular environment. And so using HTTP to allow that communication makes that really easy to do. Pretty much all the security for a distributed architecture is the same as if it was a standalone system all on one machine. If you're on a domain environment, you're going to want to use a domain service account that can be accessed on every single layer. Now, sometimes that's not possible in a production network, so you may want to just default down to a local user. You always have to, again, or you can set up a cross-domain setup, which might be way more complicated than you're wanting to do. But you could use a local user account, and then you can have access to the modules from each different layer of your network. So again, you'll have this SQL server all your modules need to access that SQL server. It's still going to be the same SQL server. You can choose where to put that within your network, but it's still going to have the same authorization requirements, or authentication requirements rather. And another example, or another layout, I guess, for distributed architecture, I always say you could put your data source module down in your level 2 or level 3 layer, but you could have most of WIN-911 down in those network layers, and then just move your internet facing modules up to the higher layers, whether it's the DMZ or business network, whatever, again, would fit your need. You can do it any way that you want. It's flexible so that you can choose which modules you put wherever, whatever your IT team is more comfortable with, we can fit within that. But again, still using HTTP for all of this. It has all the same requirements that I covered on that intermodule slide earlier. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. I think I'll let Jeremiah take over from here.
Sure. Yep. You still hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. So you can, when talking from WIN-911 to your SCADA, right, no matter which SCADA that is, iFix, InTouch, FactoryTalk, you can require that login to interact with the SCADA. So you have that option. You can add that other layer of security so that WIN-911 wouldn't even be able to talk to the SCADA if you wanted to enable security. And with this option, right, you can use an existing admin or an equivalent account within your SCADA that you already have, just to ensure that it has the required privileges. The account should obviously have access to get the alarms, to acknowledge those alarms, things like that. If you use an existing, and let's say that the password has a policy or whatever the case may be, you don't want that also causing issues with the WIN-911 side if the password changes or it gets deleted. So we recommend just a dedicated account for WIN-911 to use to log in and do what it needs to do with the SCADA. And again, those passwords are stored in SQL encrypted. All right, so we'll get into the notifiers now. So first up is voice. We have the grand stream, which is for use with your existing analog phone lines. That device is something that we sell and we configure, ship it out to you. You can buy it elsewhere, but if it's configured right, we have the admin account and password that's built onto the device itself. Also, an extension and a password for WIN-911 acting as a soft phone that's required, and that's needed for the authentication and to make calls through the grand stream, right? So on top of access to the grand stream device being restricted to the admin account, you also have to have the extension number, in this case is what we give it, and the password for that extension to be able to make calls through the grand stream. Any VoIP server out there, they will typically have the same extension or user ID with the password combo that secures it. SIP.us is one that I've done a webinar on recently, and any other Cisco Call Manager, pretty much anything out there that might be an on-premise solution is going to have a username and a password, or an extension or a phone number and a password, some combination of those things. To keep it secure, so not anything can just connect up and start trying to make calls through it. And again, those passwords are stored in SQL and they're encrypted. On to email. So if you don't know already, email is, it's long been encrypted and kept secure through TLS and SSL. It used to be plain text port 25, but this establishes a secure encrypted connection from mail clients, which in this could be one, or you logging into your Gmail or something, right? The mail clients to the mail server. Those TLS and SSL ports by default are going to be 465 and 587. Gmail, Microsoft 365, etc. Those are perfect examples of this. Email from unexpected senders is ignored. You can't spoof emails, and you can use your own internal mail server if you have something on premise, and you can choose to force TLS or not, right? You can use plain text if you want to. That's up to you, but obviously the option to use TLS and SSL is built into WIN-911. And again, those passwords are going to be stored in SQL and encrypted. So for SMS authentication, if you have an SMS modem like the Sierra Wireless or one of the Multi-Tech devices. There's an admin account and password to access the Sierra Wireless GUI. That's just even to get into it to start configuring it, right? So there's a layer of security there. And we talked to that modem, WIN-911 being the client here trying to talk to it to send a text message through it. We talked to it with the UDP fixed protocol for sending and receiving text messages. So this isn't just, somebody can randomly connect to it and start sending commands. All other traffic that is not this fixed protocol, that's going to be ignored by WIN-911 and the modem. So if you're somebody hacking into the SMS modem and causing damage, I mean, it can't really do anything except for this UDP fixed protocol sending commands and text messages. So, and then of course from the modem out into the world, SMS traffic is encrypted through the provider, so Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, etc. It's encrypted to the end user device, right, your cell phone. So that's also secured by you. You have your own PIN code, facial recognition, or thumbprint, or whatever it is to lock your own device. And then that SIM and radio chip registration for the phone to be, valid on the Verizon network, for example. So super secure, and not really a way to break into that. All right, so for the mobile authentication, there's a lot to it, and I didn't want to just, throw 10 slides at you guys. So if you go to our website, you go to support knowledge base, type in mobile, you'll see this mobile security overview. And I'm going to go ahead and pull that up for you guys right now. 1 second here to switch gears.
While he's pulling that up, I believe that there is a webinar out there where when we first introduced mobile that talks a little bit about security. If you guys wanted to check that out, you could check it out there too. But this document has been updated since then, so it wouldn't have as much info.
Yeah, and actually, Remus, can you do me a favor and cover this, and I'll keep scrolling with you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, like Jeremiah said, there's a lot to cover here. There are a few different parts of mobile. I would say the main components out there that you would be concerned with is the mobile module that lives on-prem, and that piece needs to communicate with our hosted web app, which lives it's an Azure web app, so it lives up in Azure. And then you have your mobile devices. So your mobile devices, unlike the old mobile 911, never connect directly into your network. What they do is they connect to our web app that's up in Azure, and then your mobile module that lives on-prem connects to it as well. It kind of serves as a gateway or a proxy, however you want to look at it, between those two pieces. So what happens is the WIN-911 mobile module will start up. We have given you, when you buy or demo WIN-911 mobile, we give you an account that you enter into your configuration so that it can authenticate with our WIN-911 mobile tenant. So it starts up, there's an outbound connection, so you don't need to create firewall exceptions, of course, unless you have like no outbound connections at all. But excuse me, the WIN-911 mobile module will start up this outbound connection, go to our web app, authenticate, register with it, and then as you add in connections for your mobile devices, it registers those up there as well. And then you can get your mobile app and sign in with that account, which is also an Active Directory account. Whenever you add a connection over to WIN-911 mobile, it either it allows you to use an existing Microsoft account, for example, an Office 365 account, or it prompts you to create a Microsoft account. So you can do either one. So if you have a company that's already using Office 365, you'll be able to use those same accounts to sign into your mobile app, which is kind of cool. So then when you sign into your mobile app, because that account is registered with our web app, it knows which WIN-911 systems you have access to, and then you can start receiving alarms and requesting alarms and doing everything that you need to do. Now, I mean, I'm kind of glossing it over here, but we've really gone out of our way to make sure that this is secure and fits within most enterprise networks, and we believe we have accomplish that goal. So we're really happy with WIN-911 Mobile. And if you're interested in learning more about the mobile security, then check out this document or reach out to our tech team or sales, and we can set up a one-on-one presentation to talk you through the details of it. But in the meantime, yeah, this document pretty much goes over everything. So it would take us quite a while to go through all of this. So
Yeah, I get,
but
what Revis hit on there. The main thing is that this is completely secured through Microsoft Azure and their token-based authentication. So
yeah,
the outbound initiation, nothing coming into the network that's not part of the outbound initiated session. So super secure.
I wrote this document, so if you have any questions about mobile, today's the day to ask those questions in the Q&A section. Plus,
Correct.
we've got Cody Ban on standby, who is our head engineer, who'll be able to help answer questions as well.
Correct. All right. I'll go ahead and get rid of this. And again, that's available for you guys to review, share, talk about on our knowledge base. Just type in mobile and bring up that security overview. Which brings us to the resources part, right? So documentation, webinars, how-to videos, and then in the support tab, we got knowledge base and start a support case if you're on support with us. And if you see it, it's pretty easy to remember. So just go to win911.com. Updating the view for the website, or is it still on the mobile doc?
For which thing?
I just wanted to make sure my screen was updating because I know I'm getting some
it's updating. It's on a website right now.
Okay, yeah, it should be on our web page. Yeah, okay. Yeah, apologize everybody for my Mountain Man internet hotspot data. So if you go to resources, we have documentation, how-to videos, and the webinars all right here for you. And if you go and hover on the support tab, a couple tabs over, you have start a support case and our knowledge base. If you jump into the knowledge base, you get a nice search bar up top. So like I was showing you earlier, if you were to just type in the word mobile, you can see that all those articles, including that security overview, are all coming up. So that's that for you. And we're going to jump back in here to on that webinars page. You can see we have the webinars on deck, as well as our new user training. It's a program that I started a few months ago. We have our very own Chris Cave, one of my engineers on the tech support team, who's doing a fantastic job getting a lot of new users in a month. Dates will constantly be updated. Go ahead and register if you'd like. Lots of good info. You can see our next webinar is going to be on reporting and scheduling, April 7th. Which brings us to the Q&A section. I've been going through and answering a ton of questions via chat. Go ahead and unmute all of you attendees. And if you want to type it in the question section, we'll keep answering those. If you want to speak to us, that's what we dedicated this time to. So please let us know what your questions are.
Since no one else is jumping in, I'll just ask a question that might be somewhat off topic. I started a new job at an organization where I inherited an installation of WIN-911 that is so old that we're still using dedicated phone lines and POTS cards and servers. I guess my question is, even though I've been told to leave it alone because it's working, I want to get it on a newer platform. So my big question is, given how old it is, do you guys have a somewhat seamless upgrade process since we're moving off? I want to get rid of those old POTS lines. So I guess since this is all new to me, is it all new install, or is there a way we can migrate it?
So do you happen to know if you're using the old legacy V7 of the product, version 7, or are you using the new software with the Internet Explorer based web page?
Oh no, this is probably software that's easily a decade and a half old. So
okay,
it's never been.
It's probably V7.
Yeah, it hasn't been touched since it was installed eons ago.
Okay. Yeah, so you're probably looking at the only availability back then. You're probably looking at a screen that looks like this, right? With the configurator.
Yeah, something along those lines. Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be limited to just one of those old dialogic cards for
Yep.
analog phone lines or a TAPI modem.
Sounds about right.
Both of which I think are end of life. Multitech doesn't even make the TAPI modems anymore, and
Oh, no,
we've
yeah,
obviously
this is, yeah.
branched.
Yeah. Well, the server's even end of life as of 10 years ago. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, the good news is if you get on support or get back on support, you can upgrade to our latest version free of charge, and that'll give you all the new features. The ability to use our Grand Stream device, which is just an IP PBX device, right? You can keep those analog phone lines if you want, or you can use the built-in voice over IP soft phone functionality and use something like the provider. Your own on-premise VoIP solution, whatever you want to do. But yeah, the upgrade is going to be moving forward.
Okay. You were cutting out pretty bad. Who is it that you suggested that I contact?
Oh, yeah. One sec here. My internet's going to be choppy. Remus, can you hear me?
There you go. What was the question?
Yeah.
You finally unmuted me. Go ahead and ask the question again. And
okay.
And Jeremiah, you're cutting out. So
yeah,
okay.
It's probably somewhat off topic, but I want to get on the platform that you guys are talking about, because what we currently have is, when I started this job, I inherited an ancient system that.
Oh, right. You had the version 7. You want to migrate to the new one, and is there a seamless path to do it? We have an upgrade utility that will take a lot of that configuration and move it to the new platform. But it's not 100% seamless. You'll still need to reconfigure some things because the platforms are somewhat different. So you can run the utility to get what I would use it for is to get a thing like most of your tags that you're monitoring over, because that can take a lot of time to do.
Right.
In my opinion, if you don't have a ton of contacts, though, I would redo my contacts after the migration is done. It's just because the escalation is done so much differently. Now, you may want to hold off on this because we are working on a new WIN-911, WIN-911 2021, and we're targeting this summer for that release. And it's going to be more similar to the version 7 product, and that means that our migration path will be even smoother. So you'll be able to move stuff over, and it should work. That migration should be a lot better. Now that first release won't have the migration utility, so it'll come somewhat after, so toward somewhere in the second half of the year. I don't know an exact date at the moment. But if you don't want to wait, there is a migration utility. You will have to do some reconfiguring, and then let's say you did do that, and then you move to the next version that I was just talking about, that migration will be seamless. You won't have to do anything for that.
Okay.
So
good. That's helpful.
A bunch of different answers to that question.
Yeah, no, but that helps.
Yeah.
Given that, like I said, I just inherited this platform. Yeah,
yep.
I'm having to figure out what we're going to do with it. So,
sure.
I appreciate the input.
Yeah, no problem. And if you get on, I don't know if you're current on our support program. If you get current on that, then that gets you the one you can upgrade for free to the new platform. And then you can also get the product support team to help you out with that migration. If you get stuck or have questions, they're there to help you out. So keep that in mind. And Jeremiah, I can't see the questions because I'm not an organizer, so you'll have to go through those if there are any typed out in the Q&A section.
Good morning. I guess I had a couple questions.
So can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead and ask your question.
All right. So we have an existing implementation of WIN-911 that's utilizing the hub for the mobile connection. Mm-hmm. Our IT group is not a big fan of having the hub just be able to connect outward without any restrictions. Is there a set of domains or something that has been published that we can go ahead and restrict that outbound connection to?
Yeah, there is. It's unfortunate that Jeremiah's screen share has failed. That mobile document that we were trying to show earlier, I've recently added a new section to that talks about what you need to allow access to. There's two ways to do it. There's a dynamic way to do it to say allow access to these wildcard domains, and they're all Microsoft domains, or all those domains represent a huge block of IP addresses at any given time. You could theoretically unblock those specific IP addresses, but Microsoft tells us that they change, and we can't control that. I can't control that because what it's connecting to is our Azure hosted web app. So while all these IPs may be this big block of, I can't even remember how many it is. It's like, I wanted to say it was in the 50s, like there's 50 of them or something. If it's that for this month, next month, there may be a few IPs that are different. But if your IT team has the ability to set wildcard filters for outbound access, then they can find those in this document over here. So if you scroll down, it's finally back there, Jeremiah. Yeah, scroll down a little more, right here. So if you whitelist that address, then you'll be able to connect to that, plus the addresses that are up there. So you need to allow access to those URLs. Then you'll be able to restrict what it has outbound access to. And if you don't do that, scroll down a little more, Jeremiah. There are these gateway addresses. So you can see it there. It's like G0-prod-DM2004. I'm sorry, I was saying IP addresses, but they're these host names. Those will be static for a while, and then they change. And I cannot determine when they're going to change. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm getting all confused. It's their IPs that will change. Those host names will stay the same, but their IPs will change. So it's been a little while since I wrote this up. So, but there's a script that Microsoft makes available. You can run that script. It will tell you what all the IP addresses are at any given time. But then you'd have to do that all the time because they never tell you when they're going to change. But if
you're using something like that script too, you risk that the system, if that IP does change, that a call out may fail in that short term until the firewall catches up with it, right?
That's exactly right. And if you add in each one of these different gateway addresses, then you can do that too. So I would, if you can, and I think they'd probably be okay with it, just do the wildcard whitelist on servicebus.windows.net, and then add the ones that are up above in that table, and then you'll always have access to it, and you're not allowing just full outbound access.
Okay. I guess the next question I have was with regards to the service account. Mm-hmm. In our system, we have several domains, one that makes up one that sits in the demilitarized zone going out to the internet, and another one that exists for the enterprise side. And it's not mm-hmm. possible for us to be able to do a trust or essentially bridge those two domains with the system architecture. Mm-hmm. So we had to go ahead and do a case of make the service account that local user on all the components that make up that system.
Yep.
We are looking to start bringing on other facilities, and we are starting to get a little uncomfortable with the fact that we may need to start having several process control systems connecting up through WIN-911 using those same credentials. Is there anything that's being looked forward for how to go ahead and handle that differently?
No, not at the moment. I would say that if one of your concerns is that they have to be administrator accounts, you could restrict them down after the installation, and and then make sure they just have the permission to run as a service. I mean, with the security enabled, that's what's making that requirement there. You could disable security, and then anything can call those HTTP endpoints. I mean, I don't think that's probably the route that you want to go, but then it wouldn't matter what anything is running as, because anything your services could run as any user account, and you wouldn't need that service account. But no, for this next version, I mean, we're still doing the same method of authentication and message transport. I don't know of anything else there, unless Cody, you have something to say?
Yeah, I just add, can you hear me?
Yep.
I just add that, in order for point-to-point security to function, both sides have to be able to authenticate one another. They don't necessarily all have to run as the same account. And so all of those modules could technically run as completely different accounts as long as each side is able to authenticate the other. And so for a cross-domain scenario, cross-domain access is a must. For local accounts, the requirement then is that the same username and password be used on both sides. But you could certainly do a set of accounts, and between point A and point B, use one pair of one set of credentials, and then between points B and C, you could use a completely separate set of credentials. So that may mitigate the issue. You talked about rolling out an additional site, so maybe you can work something out with a additional credential set for each site or something.
Yeah, and if it really came down to it, I mean, we are using WCF for this. There are different security models available. It would be custom for your situation, but you could move to transport security and generate an SSL cert. It sounds like you probably have the ability to do that for your network, and you can move to that level of security. But I mean, that would be a very manual setup. I mean, we could do our best to help you out with that, and show you what you need to change to make that happen. But we don't have any tools to make that easier. You'd have to go and edit a bunch of config files to make that happen.
Yeah, but because it is based on WCF security, that is something that can be defined config time, rather than compile time. So like Stephen said, you have the ability to go into the config files of the system and completely shift to no security or transport security with Kerberos instead of Windows authentication. All of that's a possibility.
Okay, I might reach out later on to either figure out how to do separate credentials or attempt to set that up for our situation.
Sure.
Or I guess another one is, can you have several hubs, like one per system, and still connect out through the same account or route calls out essentially to the same phone app?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so you could definitely have multiple hubs running on different machines. Now it's one hub per machine, so you can't run two instances of the hub on the same machine, and they could all be using the same Windows user account, and that would be totally fine.
Yeah,
Or
you
to
can
say, can you have several of those hubs exist, one per system, and have the credentials for the local user be the same through that system only?
I mean, the local user credentials would have to be the same on every hub system and every WIN-911 system.
Okay.
I mean, they could be a one-to-one, like you have user A for system one and on the WIN-911 machine, and then on the hub, that its respective hub, it's got user A, and then on the second system you have user B, and then on the hub system you have user B, and so on. Or you can make them all the same. It really wouldn't matter.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm answering your question the way that you're wanting, but
I think I understood the response, and I think, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it sounds.
Yeah, I can reach out for some of the. Sounds like the WCF configuration might be the route that we're looking for there. So
Yeah,
I can reach out.
if you have questions about that, let us know. We've been dealing with it for a long time, so maybe we can unveil some of its. If you're confused by any of it, unveil some of that confusion.
Okay,
But
then I
it's
guess I
pretty
had
flexible.
one.
It's pretty flexible in what it can do, though.
Okay. Then I guess I had one more question with regards to kind of the network architecture and the security. We're starting to go ahead and migrate most of our systems to having the process control system reside on its complete separated network, meaning that it has its own demilitarized zone in between the enterprise network and the kind of plant floor network.
Sure.
And then obviously there's a separate demilitarized zone that the enterprise side uses to go from internet to the enterprise side. That demilitarized zone that is in between the internet and the enterprise side is where we have the WIN-911 hub residing for our system now due to its need for internet access. But it is that the demilitarized zone for the industrial side doesn't quite right now have something that can kind of act as kind of a jump host, I guess you could say, or a proxy.
Right.
Is there some means to do a second hub there, or do you recommend putting the WIN-911 server in the DMZ in the industrial side, or how does the architecture look for that type of situation?
We don't have plans to create a hub for a second hop. In fact, I think your answer is probably what I would have just said. I mean, you can put the majority of WIN-911 in the process DMZ, and then have your data source. What data source are you guys using, or what SCADA?
This would be Rockwell Plant PAX View SE.
Okay, so it's all factory talk alarm events. So you have to have that data source module running on a computer that's a member of your factory talk directory, which means it's going to have to be down on level 2 or level 3 or whatever, however you're organizing it. Basically, it needs to be where it has access to the factory talk servers. So you'd have that data source module there, and then you'd have the rest of WIN-911 in the DMZ, or you could just move the mobile module to the DMZ and then have the mobile module connect to the mobile hub, which is kind of an extra hop. So you'd have WIN-911 down in your control network, just the mobile module distributed to your DMZ, and then that piece would jump over to your mobile hub, which is running in your other DMZ.
Right. The WIN-911 architecture itself supports distributing over 3 network layers, and then the mobile hub gives you a 4th layer. So as long as you don't need to span more than 4 layers, there's no need for any additional proxy or anything.
Okay, and the port numbers that would go between the mobile module to the hub are different from that, from the mobile module to the primary server?
Yeah, so from the core part of WIN-911 to the mobile module is 40, 20, and 80. Those are the 2 ports that we use. And then from the mobile module to the mobile hub, I believe it's 59111. And there might be another port there, but it's still not 40, 20, or 80. And then the mobile module uses totally different ports, or uses 443 pretty much, and like this other port 52 something or other. But they're all different. Every side is a different port set.
Perfect. I think that answers my question. That gives me a couple different routes to go to handle that. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Cool. You have one question that I wanted Cody and Revis for either of you to hit on, which was the question about plans to remove the requirement of WIN-911 user needing the sysadmin role.
Is the question, what is the question? Whether we're going to remove it for the next version?
Yeah, have there ever been any plans? Are there any plans coming up to remove that requirement of the sysadmin role? Because a lot of people don't like putting that on.
I know that, well, like I said, you don't have to keep it after the install. And I know that that may not be enough for some people. I know that right now we're not planning on changing it for this next release. But it's something we can revisit. Like I said, you need to, at the minimum, you need to have the DB creator role during an installation. Sysadmin just gives you full access to do whatever we need to do on the instance, and then during runtime, we just need to be able to read and write to the database. We could, while we're not looking at doing that right now, it's something we can revisit and see what's possible with the problem is, one of the things I'm worried about are upgrades and things that have to happen in an upgrade on the instance, but I'll look into it. If it's possible, then I think we'll try and go ahead and do it. If it's going to make upgrades a huge problem, then I'll rely on you guys to downgrade that particular user after the install's done.
Yeah, the technical requirement is DB creator, and hopefully that makes sense for when you're doing an installation, you're doing an upgrade installation. We're migrating that data schema, we're creating new tables, we're disposing tables and modifying their contents and everything like that. And so we need that DB creator role while we're migrating the data. Once we've done that, we really just need read-write privileges. The reason that the install goes a step further and does the sysadmin is so that the installing user can actually set the WIN-911 service account user up with those permissions, and being able to control the permissions of another account, of a second account, that goes beyond the DB creator role. So that bit of simplification for installing users, I agree, it kind of is at odds with a more enterprise that is fine managing the SQL instance and its users, themselves.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. Type all this out. Walter Richards was asking about for failover between two SCADAs, and if one fails over, does he need another one at once for SCADA? So yeah, that you do want to have the hot backup license from the WIN-911 perspective. You should have two WIN-911 installations, one on each SCADA ideally, and you script that behavior into your SCADA failover. So if SCADA A goes down, it should call out an executable that we've created and provided you guys in our WIN-911 install. It's called standby.exe, and you could run that, make it standby, and while you bring up your SCADA B to be active, it would also run the activate.exe on its local WIN-911 to turn it to active, and that would just keep failing back and forth and activating the correct WIN-911 install. Everything else I have tried to answer via messages directly back. If there's anything unanswered, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask away before we finish up here. And if you're unable to mute yourself or don't have a mic or something, go ahead and text into the questions section. I'll give you guys a minute. While we're waiting on any final questions, up on the screen you should see the professional development hours. If you do want a certificate of completion, you can go ahead and just email sales@win911.com and include your name and your company. We'll go ahead and send one out to you. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around. Great questions. Hopefully this helped you out. Thank you, Cody. Thank you, Stephen Rivas.
Thanks, everybody.
Sure, thank you.